What do you do when the future that you imagine, the life that you had planned for yourself, just disappears right in front of your face? How do you deal with that? What do you do when the person that you plan on spending the rest of your life with decides that they're done? Walks away from the marriage, breaks off the engagement. What do you do when the job that you've held for 20 years is downsized and you're let go? And you realize that there's no market out there for someone with your skills and your training anymore. What do you do? What do you do when the bank forecloses on your home, or your farm, or your business? What do you do? What do you do when you graduate from college and realize that those employers are not beating a path to your door to offer you the plum job that you thought was just going to be waiting for you as soon as you got that diploma? What do you do when you hear the word cancer, or Alzheimer's, or MS, or any number of other words like that? Well, when I received my cancer diagnosis, it took about a week to get the full report in terms of what we were dealing with. And as it turned out, the type of cancer that I had was not something that could be treated with chemotherapy or radiation or any of those things. The only treatment that worked was you went in and you tried to get it all out. Luckily, it was early enough and my tumor was small enough that they were able to do that. But that week, that first week, in between the initial diagnosis and then finding out the rest of it, I struggled. I struggled terribly. Struggled with trying to figure out, well, where do I go from here, and what does this mean, and what do I do, and how do I make sense of this? At one point I said to myself, well, we're not going to have kids. That's off the table. Because even if this works out, it could come back, and I don't want to put my kids through the possibility of watching me die. And of course, I was someone who had that experience myself, watching my mom die. And at another point, I thought, well, I'm just going to cut Carol loose. So that way she can, move on and find somebody that, is healthy and that will be there. And at one point I thought, well, maybe I'll leave ministry and try to find another type of work that allows me to make a little more money so I can leave some kind of a nest egg, to help Kara out in case I'm not around in a few years. That was a mess. Just a total mess. But again, it was that not knowing that what's going to happen, what's not going to happen. And I was crippled by it, paralyzed by it. As it turns out, at the same time that I was going through all this, my grandfather was actually dying of cancer. And I remember one of the last times I saw him, went to visit him, he was in a care facility by that point. And, I just kind of let loose with all of this, all of my fears hindsight, it was horrible. I mean, he's dying, and I'm just sitting there, just crying like a big baby. But that's what I did. But in the midst of that, my grandpa was a big, strong guy. Must be a grandpa thing. But he'd lost a lot of strength over the course of his illness. But as I sat there, just kind of crying and then my head down, all of a sudden I feel this iron grip on my arm. And I said, I don't know what to do. And he said, Michael, you live. That's what you do. You live. And essentially, that's what God is saying to the Israelite people in their own moment of despair and question and hopelessness about their future. Those are God's words to them through Jeremiah. Build houses, plant gardens, love one another, make and keep commitments to one another, raise your families, live. You don't know what the future's going to hold. This isn't the future you hoped or wished for. Live. And I think that that's God's message to all of us in the midst of any of those situations, inevitable situations that visit all of us, that make us question and anxious and fearful of the future and what the future may hold. Live. Continue to live, even in the midst of the not knowing, even in the midst of the questions and the doubts and the fears. Continue to live each day as the gift that it is. It sounds kind of cliche, but I think it's true, particularly for us as people of faith. And that is that while we don't know what the future holds for any of us, we do know who it is that holds that future. And it is in that knowledge that we find the hope and the faith and the strength and the courage